I get asked this all the time. I get asked a lot of things all the time, but I get asked, how can I get in the door? I think more than anything else, people ask me about building relationships. And that, generally that common question is, how can I get in the door? How can I meet people, federal buyers like those in the Air Force and the Space Force, to begin to start and build relationships? That's what we're going to talk about today. Success in sales, and I think you would agree to this, is 10 times, maybe even 100 times easier when you develop relationships with your buyers, when you begin to learn from those buyers through the meetings that you have, and you progress through truly building a relationship, not making it a transactional event where you reach out and you try to get something and then basically go away, which sometimes is okay. But if you're trying to build a strategic relationship, then you see the long game, and you're going in and having multiple meetings. And through each one of those meetings, you're learning a little bit more about your buyer, and your buyer's getting a little bit more, learns a little bit more about you. But that can't happen, right? Unless you're in the door. And so if you're selling to the United States Department of Air Force, which is this top level, or the Air Force and the Space Force, which are below that, then you want to make sure you're building those relationships. And I'm going to talk to you about those relationships can be everywhere, by the way. There's, we call them major commands, which the Air Force, Department of Air Force, is changing up a little bit to, I can't remember. I think they're calling them institutional commands and like service commands. Basically the same thing, major commands, but they wanted to sit there and separate out basically back office and those fighting a war. And those are my words, not theirs. But you can go watch or read a post I did earlier in the week that they laid out their plans, and I shared it with you about that. But that's what we're going to dive into today, and we're going to be talking specifically about meeting buyers, right? I want to give you tips from a different angle of meeting buyers in the Department of Air Force. I'll cover down in the time we have together, about 25 minutes here, in these three ways. I first want to talk to you about just understanding, if you're trying to get in the door and you're trying to build relationships, then who are those people? They are not all the same. And there's great ways to group them. And so I group them into this sales methodology of thinking about the people at your customer, agency, et cetera. There's 3 points of entry, or 3 roles that people fall under when you're reaching out to them. And we're going to talk about that. When you understand that, it makes it easier to do the second thing we'll cover down on, is what's the best email to write. So each one of those points of entry, you might come up with a different approach. So I want to give you just a high level email framework, right? I'm not going to give you a bunch of templates, et cetera. I might do that in the box, but generally I just do that with my customers. But I can give you the framework to get a response. By the way, since those of you who are here early, I am going to sit there and say, give me an example so that I can maybe try your biggest agency that you're trying to get into. Maybe I can write an email live for you. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is just understanding the power of sources sought notices. There's an RFP, a request for proposal, and that's the formal acquisition, the end of the acquisition, right? But the market research, there's so much power being involved in there. It literally is the equivalent of having relationships with people. If you can't have strategic relationships and get in the door, then this is another very powerful thing. I don't want to say it's second or above the relationships. They're equally powerful in helping you get in the Air Force in particular. That's who I'm talking about today. Okay, if you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I am the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, co-founder of GovCon in a Box. It's our AI platform, SaaS platform, where we provide tools for success in the sales side that matches what I teach day after day. And I wanted to welcome Nadia Roberts from Interior Talent to the 100 Club. The 100 Club is around your federal visibility score. How visible are you to federal buyers? And so in govconinabox.com, we created a free tool in there that you can see how visible are you to those federal buyers. And on a scale of 1 to 100, what's your score? Most people have a score of 70 and below. These 92 companies have a perfect score of 100. Doesn't mean they're getting contracts rolling at them, but it means that the federal buyer is trying to find them, the likelihood is much, much higher. So welcome, Nadia, to the ranks. Okay, let's get diving in. Just talking about the 3 points of entry. And actually, I was going to switch over for a second and just turn off my slides for a second and just talk to you about, there's 3 points of entry that you can go through when you're trying to get into an agency and sell to the Air Force as an example. These 3 points of entry, we call them focuses, right? Focus is a receptivity, focus is a dissatisfaction, and focus is a power. You can go through any door at any point, but it's really important to understand, who am I talking to? Am I talking to a focus of power, the people with the money, or am I talking to a focus of dissatisfaction, the people with the problem or the new goal that they want to achieve? Or am I talking to the focus of receptivity, somebody who's sympathetic to your wanting to get into an agency, but really have no particular problem you're going to be able to solve for them, and they have certainly no power to sign a contract. And so these 3, when you understand who you're trying to get in or who you're talking to, then you'll be able to prepare your meeting preparation material better. You'll be able to send better emails when you're just even trying to land that meeting. So let me back up for a second on these 3. A focus of receptivity, one of the most obvious examples in the Air Force are the small business professionals. These people have different titles all around the federal agencies: small business specialist, deputy of small business program, I think is what the Navy calls it, but they're all small business professionals. For the most part, they're full-time in their job supporting an agency or a command in the Air Force, for example. In the Air Force, there are multiple people. So there's, I think they have 170 small business professional. Most of them are full-time. Some of them are part-time. They're dual-hatted. They've got another responsibility. But these are focuses of receptivity. Their job is to look out to industry and go, well, could small business help? Can I help small businesses that are procurement ready, that got something that the Air Force could use? Can I help them come in and meet my program office internal customers, right? And so these people, and it's the same thing, when the internal customers has something, they're keeping their ears out to industry. That's a great focus of receptivity. Another focus of receptivity could be somebody who for another company might be a focus of dissatisfaction. Example is, let's say you're in cybersecurity, or actually, let me say HR, it's better. If you're in HR of whatever level, and you're at an event and you meet a chief of logistics. So in a VA hospital, they're pretty big, like 4,000 people or something. In a VA hospital, you might have a chief of logistics and facilities. They're responsible for basically the whole campus, but you don't sell to them. But they meet every morning at 7:30 with the other chiefs, and they might know that chief of HR very well, right? So they are a focus of dissatisfaction to logistics companies, but to an HR company, they could be a focus of receptivity. And they're like, oh no, happy to talk to you about how to get you further in. I can make an introduction to John or Sally, who are the HR heads, right? And so no matter where somebody is in a company, depending on what you sell in their role, they can fit into that receptivity, dissatisfaction, and power. So focus is a receptivity. The most important thing to keep in mind about them is they have no problem you're going to solve, and they have no money to give you, but they're willing to talk about the Air Force to you. The next one are focuses of dissatisfaction. Focuses of dissatisfaction are the program office, for the most part. These are the people who have a particular need. So they might have an actual problem. If we stick with HR, their problem might be something as straightforward as we need to staff up that VA hospital I was just talking about, or we need to staff up the Air Force Command that we're in on maybe the civilian side. And so that's a problem when they're not full capacity with the people they need. They might have goals, right? We want to be able to take our people and all of our people and really take their AI skill set to the next level. We want to teach everybody in our command how to use AI as knowledge workers. If you don't know that term, knowledge workers, basically what all of us are who are around a computer, right? So even in a construction company, you have knowledge workers and you have people swinging a hammer. For the most part, the swinging the hammers are not going to use AI, but in that company, the program or project manager, the people who are managing the budgets and the schedules, et cetera, all that, those people are knowledge workers. And so I might say that my goal, not my problem, but my goal is AI is here. How can I train these my team to get to that next level? And so you're trying to find in the focus of dissatisfaction people whose problem is addressed by your solution, or people whose goals are addressed by your solution. So if you're a training company and you're around that, or staff development, then that'd be a good idea. The last group is focus of power. In the federal market, in the Air Force, it's the contracting officer. If you don't know this, the contracting officer is the only one who can sign a contract. right? And so they're the focuses of power. It doesn't matter about anybody else. They're all influencers, right? Those focuses of dissatisfaction, they influence the sale, but the power comes from the contracting officer who makes that final decision and signs it, right? They might negotiate with you, et cetera. And so those three roles, just think small business specialist, program office, and contracting officer. So when you're trying to get into an agency, you want to build relationships with each of these type of people. And when you meet with each one of them, you want to begin to understand, how do I move forward? So a small business professional really would be a good stepping off point to get to both the dissatisfied people, focuses of dissatisfaction, and the focuses of power. But the program office, they're better yet just exploring the problem. And to take this sideways for just a second, the focus of dissatisfaction can have a problem, but somebody else that they work with outside of their department. So let's say the HR department has a problem with hiring people. They have that problem. But who are they trying to hire? They're trying to hire people up for the logistics or the IT department, right? And so that problem they have is also further expanded into those other departments. And so with them, you want to be talking to them about that. As you think about reaching out into the Air Force or into any agency, think about these three people, right? Focuses of receptivity, focuses of dissatisfaction, focuses of power. When you understand them and you start targeting an agency command and you build a target list, a list of like, let's say 100 people you're going to reach out to, you want some that are the receptivity, some that are dissatisfaction, some that are power. When you do that, you begin to get a much fuller picture of what's going on in the Air Force. You'll be able to get people who are introducing you to other people, et cetera. Okay, so let's move on to an email framework. And here, I didn't want to give you something I've given you before, because I have done so many trainings on how to reach out and get in the door using emails, as an example, or phone calls. And so I want you to go watch the replays. They're very good trainings. They're the same trainings I teach my customers in our workshop, things like that, right? But the part that I wanted to talk to you about is really just think about the simplicity around the email framework, the email that you send. And when I say a framework, it's just basically what are the sentences in the email. Before I talk about this more, I'm going to come back to the chat and I'm going to look in a second. If you've got a particular agency you're trying to get into, or a particular person you're trying to get in and land a meeting and you haven't tried yet, or maybe you have tried, put that in the chat. Let me see it. I'm trying to get in to meet with, and you don't have to put their name, but I'm trying to get in to meet with John. But do give me the agency or where they're at and their type of role and whether you think they're an FR. If you put that in, I'll use yours as an example if I got time here. Okay, so let me come back to the first bullet. The most important thing to remember about email frameworks when you're sending it is they need to be simple and direct. The whole thing needs to be simple and direct. So you begin with the subject line. Literally, it's the same as my LinkedIn trainings or my LinkedIn posts. When I do a LinkedIn training and you're deciding whether to come, that title that I put on the training is the subject line of an email. It's the thing that attracts you to open it to decide whether you say you're going to attend. Well, people who get your email, and you must know this as a person who gets emails, right? People who get your emails, they're thinking the same thing. When they look at their inbox and there's 20 or 30 or 40 emails from the day, then they judge everything by that first line in there. And so what I say is make it simple. The rule of thumb is 50 or less characters for sure. The second thing is make it direct. And this idea of one of my favorites is I like to have an intro call, right? So if I'm putting in a subject line, it literally will say intro call and then maybe dash, AFMC / GovCon in a box or something. So it looks like it's business email and it's not a spammy email. By the way, I'm anti mail merge or automated emails. If you're doing that, then you don't really care about that agency. You're trying to just spam out there and try to see who responds. But if you do one person at a time, then you can write that subject line that is aligning to that person. If you research them, you'll be able to figure that out. The other thing to keep in mind about the subject line and the email is they should be written like a Twitter post or like a LinkedIn post, just very quick. Because imagine you're scrolling through Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. How do you react? How do you behave? You're looking for something that catches your eye. That's called a hook, right? You're looking for it to catch your eye, stop you, And then it should be interesting enough that you click on it to see more. In this case, the subject line is that. And there's no perfect subject line. And here's why. First off, if there was and I give it to you, then we'd all use it and it would defeat the purpose, right? The only thing you can do with the subject line is really try to make it for that person. Now, intro call, I might use that a lot in the subject line, but I put something in there unique to intro call to discuss strategic plan, which goes into the body. So here, I just wanted to lay out this body to show you how short emails are. When I send an email, I always use people's first name. Unless I'm reaching out to a military person, then generally what I do, just this is me, and you have to always respect the different ranks of your customers, et cetera. But I'm like, I believe in first name basis. I think that makes our connection so much better when we're talking. And so if I know, if it's a civilian type person, I just say, hi, John, right from the beginning. And that's not a problem to me. If it's military person, I just say, hi. I don't even say anything else. And I sign it, thanks, Neil, or regards, Neil, because I'm as quickly as possible trying to get to the first name basis. I want to have a conversation. That aside, inside the meat, these second and third bullets here, I say I have two basic things I'm trying to hit. The first thing is I hooked you from my subject line. I got you to open the email. Now, I don't want to like go off in a different tangent. If what I said is in the subject line was attractive enough that you open the email, then what I say the very first thing in my email body needs to basically be an expansion of that. I don't want to go in a different direction or start selling or anything. Literally, you're trying to build relationships, and building relationships first and foremost is about understanding the other person. Then you begin to introduce yourself. And I'm okay introducing myself 2-3 meetings later. But so I wrote here, I was reading. And what I mean by this is a good example is a strategic plan. I was reading the strategic plan, for FEMA, for AFMC and the Air Force, whatever. I was reading the strategic plan and looking at goal 1 about data integrity or something, if that's related to the person I'm reaching out to. Can I get on your schedule in the next week or two for a 15 to 30 minute call? The reason this is really a good framework is because I'm quickly giving them context of why I want to talk to them. I want to talk about data, their data, and the second thing I'm asking is, are you going to meet with me or are you not? And you can get one of 3 answers, right? Yes, no, or no answer. And I leave maybe out for 1 second, right? But no's are just as good as yeses. You want responses. I did an outreach recently for 400 people we reached out to, and we got almost 100 within the first couple of weeks, 2 weeks, right? Almost 100 responses. They were at various levels, and like 3 of them were true no's. The rest of them were full out yeses, we'll meet, or variations of yeses, do this first type thing. And so you want to keep that pretty simple. Let me check to see if somebody threw something in. Just it's Happy Friday. Okay, so I'm not sure if I'm seeing it. I'm not sure, Christy, if you're putting this in on Space Force, but I don't think I see something in the chat that is there. It's funny. I don't know how to use my tool, the chat, but I'm not really seeing it in there on anybody's example. So let me use one more example that I was just running into with a customer that's important for you to understand about sending out emails, et cetera. I have a customer who is going through a challenge at the moment where they're getting meetings, but then the meetings go sidetracked. In this particular case, it's not with the Air Force, but it's a good example. It's with a prime contractor, let's say at the Air Force. And the idea is they were sending out emails, they were getting a meeting. And the problem is in the meeting, they really didn't get a second meeting. And what we discovered and what we're advising our customer on is you have got to make sure it's clear on what you want in your email so that you don't get something else. So an example is if you say, I want to see if there's opportunities for us to team together, then in that first meeting, if you can't get really traction on the teaming, then you're out of there. Or if you're talking to a large, they're going to say, well, bring me opportunities. But if instead you say, I want to learn, I want to have a meeting and talk about this. I understand you have this goal and this is what you're doing. I want to explore that. This is the difference between a transactional relationship where you're just reaching out to get something, which is not necessarily bad, And the difference between that and a strategic relationship where I'm trying to build a long-term relationship geared towards mutual growth, right? Somebody asked about how long do I think an email should be. Emails, every line that I write here, I say 150 characters is what I'm looking at. So an email, if I was saying I was reading something, 150 characters is kind of my target limit. That's what I want to keep there. And then number of paragraphs, no more than 3. It's just like LinkedIn posts. We want to pop people from one area to the next to be able to see it. By the way, if you want to send me an email that says, hey, here's my email template I sent, you got any advice on it? I'm happy to send it. I'm happy to give you advice. The only thing I would ask you is let me reuse it as examples to other people. I'll strip out anything that describes you, unless you want me to leave it in, which is great marketing, but I'll strip it out. But this way I can teach other people. But I'm happy to look at your email and give you some just honest feedback. By the way, don't send it to me unless you want candid feedback. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is the power of sources sought. If you're trying to get in the Air Force, and a lot of us struggle. It's like, oh, who do I call? How do I get in? How do I get them to respond? Well, one of the best ways to get in my opinion, and to get visibility, right? It's not the only way, but it is one of the best ways out there, is to just respond to RFIs and sources sought. These are where the government is reaching out, trying to engage industry to discuss the requirements that typically is RFIs, to talk about, hey, here's what our needs are, what are the possible solutions, et cetera. So they really are trying to engage industry. If you watch my training or my fireside chat yesterday with Major General Trevino, you'll see that she was talking about this thing in particular, saying we need to engage and want to engage with industry. And so we look for you to respond to those sources sought and RFI notices. Sources sought tends to be a little farther along, where they're looking at more the acquisition approach. Are there women-owned small businesses or veteran-owned out there, et cetera? Why are they valuable to you? And here's the number one reason. I'm watching my time, so I'm going to go a little faster. But when I write an RFI response, it goes back to the government and it gets really good visibility. Sometimes it goes to just, let's say, a market researcher like the small business specialist or the core who got that job. Other times it's a little more advanced and it's going back, and it literally is going to the program office and the contracting shop. And so you've got a bigger set of eyes on them. My last business, I won all sorts of business by writing to an RFI that then got me invited in to talk to them. And because all of our leadership was technical experts, we were able to wow them completely. You know, we didn't conceptually talk about what we did. We literally were talking about what we did yesterday that related to what they had. So it's really valuable to getting you in there. And I already described kind of what happens to your response. All across the federal government, sometimes things don't happen the way you want. Don't ever let an RFI that goes into a black hole stop you from writing another one and another one. That's like getting dumped on by a boyfriend or girlfriend or something and then never dating again. It's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. That just didn't work out, but you can date again. You can write another RFI and sources sought. And if you stick to the ones that you know, your core competency, you have reusable, you can reuse all sorts of content. I would recommend you're doing 4 RFIs a month, right? I talk about this later, where you should be doing 4 RFPs a month. But the idea is, if you're writing to an RFI and you're writing to what you're good at, don't write to every RFI, but write to your core competencies. For me, it would have been SharePoint in my last company. And if I'm finding 4 of those, then I'm writing to those. I just looked before I came on, there's 923 active RFIs right now that are due in the next 30 days on SAM. There is a ton in there. You should be taking the time to go in there and look at it. I haven't posted this in a little bit, and I probably will tomorrow for the fun of it, but you should look at those and browse through all 923. Do not filter them out by NAICS codes or keywords. Yes, you could do that for the fun of it, but the problem is there's inconsistencies about how a federal buyer uses a NAICS code or a keyword, et cetera. Scroll through there. I did training 2 days ago about the Air Force, and I searched on SharePoint over the last 2 years. 5 opportunities came up. I had more than that in my last company in any given year. And so they used different words than SharePoint. And so I had to scroll through and go, oh, content management or this. Take the time. You could scroll through 923 opportunities in 15 minutes. If one of them comes back and delivers you a contract, it well is worth that time. Just in the next 2 weeks, go one way or another, I'm going to respond to an RFI. It doesn't have to be that big of a lift for you. and you start getting better and better the more you write, as long as they're in the same sweet spot. So I like to end on time. I'm going to just remember, government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. I will see you in the next training.